Word Balloon, celebrating 16 years of excellence for you.
Every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for another episode of the Big Bout podcast, part of the Word Balloon Network. The intro more appropriate than ever, given the subjects that we're going to be discussing today. John Suntress here. We've got the Ringside Seat Editor-in-Chief, Bill Detloff. We have Ringside Seat writers and contributors and production design people, Mike Cronenberg, Steve Cronenberg. Welcome, gentlemen. Great to see you all.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Great issue, guys. Let's start with Ringside Seat 16. Here's a wonderful cover and kind of explains a lot of what's inside the magazine. But the big cover story that Steve did, the 45th anniversary of Sylvester Stallone's unbelievable Oscar-winning movie, Rocky. Steve, your premise for one of the premises beyond getting some of the behind-the-scenes information is you say that Rocky kind of ended the war on boxing.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I watched Rocky, and I thought about the other boxing films that had preceded it, especially the really highly acclaimed films like Body and Soul and The Setup, Requiem for a Heavyweight, and The Harder They Fall. And all of them, in my opinion, were anti-boxing films. They used boxing as a metaphor for the big, bad, corrupt world and how it can dash and break dreams. And Rocky, as far as I know, is the first movie, or at least the first Hollywood movie, that ennobled the sport of boxing. And that paid tribute to the history of boxing and to various traditions that existed in the world of boxing, as opposed to these other films, which, however great, all were pointing to boxing and to the boxing ring as sort of a petri dish, as I said, for cons, crooks, and corruption. And they ended with boxers either being tossed to the gutter and forgotten or just quitting the sport in disgust because they were surrounded by corrupt people. Rocky as far as I know, is a pure boxing film, and maybe the first pure boxing film that, as I said, ennobles the sport.
That's a great angle that you came up with, Steve. And I was taken by it when I started reading the piece, which is very well written, of course.
Thank you.
And it prompted me to want to ask you if, and you kind of just answered it, but I wanted to ask you anyway, if that angle, that this is the first boxing movie that kind of celebrates the sport, whether that angle just occurred to you organically, and it sounds like it just did, or were you looking for a fresh angle on the film that hadn't been explored yet? Because you would think at this point that every angle, every conceivable angle about the film had been explored already in some medium or another, right? And I'd never seen this angle explored before. So was it merely that you saw the movie again or revisited it and said, this is the first one, like you just explained, or were you looking for a different angle?
I was looking for a different angle. So much had been written about Rocky.
Right.
And a lot of what I found in my research was all about what Rocky represented to the people that loved it, the underdog story, both the backstory being an underdog story and the fictional story being an underdog story.
Yep.
And the whole story of Sylvester Stallone creating the script, being broke at the time, watching the Ali Wepner fight, things that people already knew, things that I knew. And when Michael and I discussed the idea of writing an article about Rocky and celebrating the 45th anniversary, I started thinking about it. And it occurred to me, this is the first important boxing film that really, as I said, celebrates the sport and doesn't in some way smear it with corruption and with con men and with dashed dreams. So it was something that an angle that I wanted to explore. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, this really is the first major Hollywood boxing movie that celebrates boxing in the right way.
I had never when you sent Bill and I the story to read, I was like, damn, this is true. Because I think the boxing community and boxers embrace Rocky. I think they embrace all the Rocky movies, but they particularly embrace that first Rocky movie. They love it. It is a beloved film. And I have to admit that I when I saw it as a kid, I really loved it, being a boxing fan. But over time, seeing the other movies that you mentioned, The Setup and Requiem for a Heavyweight, all of these movies, they became the movies that I loved and really enjoyed. And my thoughts back to Rocky diminished it. And you were the one who said to me, you really need to watch it. It's grittier than you remember.
Oh yeah.
And of course I had to watch it knowing I was going to, design your piece, and I wanted to watch it again. And I was shocked because I really liked it. I thought it was great.
Film. I love it.
I thought it was great. I mean, I may be indifferent towards the other Rocky films, but boy, that first one is fantastic.
Well, it absolutely is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
That's Please. Okay. I was 11 when it came out, and it's no coincidence that it was part of a real resurgence in boxing in the United States. The film came out the same year that USA won 5 gold medals at the Olympics. Boxing was very big in the United States, and this film was one of the reasons. And there's probably a couple dozen fighters who have long since retired already that became fighters as a result of this movie. And the one that comes to mind immediately is Vinny Pazienza.
Absolutely.
Who has said straight out the moment he saw this movie, that was it. He knew he was going to be a fighter. There's a reason that it still resonates with fight fans. And even like you, Michael, the guys who have seen it for the first time in 20 years. I absolutely love the film. It is gritty and it's funny, and it's the writing at points. It's corny, of course, but at times it's so perfect. It's brilliant. There's so many scenes that just give me chills to this day, and I've seen it probably 30 times.
Tarantino, I think, makes a great point. Oh, excuse me, Steve. Go ahead, and then I'll make.
What I was about to say was Michael was the one that told me that boxing fans love Rocky. I wasn't sure.
Really?
Do they like it? Do they not like it? it got mixed critical reviews. Of course, I don't believe anything I read about from the snooty New York film critics, but several of the snooty New York film critics said that it was too saccharine, that it was, mawkish. And I thought, okay, how do fight fans really feel about Rocky? Michael was the one that set me straight and said they really love Rocky. So I thought, okay, there's a reason for this. And when I watched the movie and when I did my research and saw interviews with Stallone, Carl Weathers, the people that made the film, I realized why boxing fans love Rocky.
I was going to say that Tarantino points out, and I think this is an interesting observation, and I believe he's right. First of all, Rocky, the original, is a great 70s movie.
Absolutely.
But the difference is we were so used to the hard realism that was coming out in the 70s and gritty, negative endings, if not out and out, like, I mean, if this were made by a different filmmaker, Rocky might have killed himself for not winning the big fight. I'm being facetious, but you know what I mean? And Tarantino's like, this is when Hollywood got this signal that having happy endings were okay again.
Huh.
And Rocky, and again, we're not spoiling 45 years later, but yeah, Rocky loses the fight, but does what he wanted to do. Hey, as long as I can go to the distance with this guy.
Which is part of the charm, that he loses and wins. Right?
Absolutely. Right. Yes.
Right. It lends more grittiness and more realism to the movie instead of a fairy tale ending where he
absolutely
wins,
right.
He wins
absolutely
the fight.
Right.
And I saw an interesting YouTube interview with Stallone right after the movie had come out, and it was a success. May have been some morning, network television show, and he said the exact same thing you were talking about, John, which is, he wanted the movie to be different from what was currently coming out. And at that time and that year that the movie came out, Taxi Driver was nominated for an Academy Award. All the President's Men was nominated for an Academy Award. Bound for Glory, Network also was another movie that was nominated that year.
Yep.
So you're talking about, that was the peak of like 70s cinema, which was, very anti-government, anti-establishment, very dark. And Stallone specifically said, I wanted this movie to be different from everything else that's coming out right now. I wanted, to have a movie that has hope, that has dreams that are fulfilled. It was a pretty interesting interview, but just exactly what you were saying, John. That's what he was talking about.
And Steve, the other thing too is that as you said, the other earlier boxing films, we're going to get into it because, of course, you guys also put out recently an excellent book, Ringside Cinema, which does take a look at some of these great images of boxing movie posters over the years. But what I like about Rocky is, you're right. The other ones are really cynical. You got the gangsters manipulating things. There is manipulation in Rocky with Apollo Creed and and Juergens, the promoters, intent with this promotion. And in fact, you always love Tony Burton's line after Rocky knocks Apollo down in the early rounds, and he says he doesn't know it's a show. He thinks it's a real fight.
Right.
And that's the thing is it's matter of fact that this is a spectacle rather than a real competitive fight. And again, I think it's something that the wise boxing fans were always aware of. I always wonder about what the movie-going people who aren't used to really watching fights the way that we watch fights and everything. And it's like, oh, what are they talking about? We knew that Rocky was being picked out of obscurity, but it really is kind of a slightly cynical, but less cynical than the other.
It won Best Movie. John Avildsen won Best Director. I had a conversation on Twitter with Janet Maslin, who was the film critic for the New York Times, and I talked about 1976 and the nominees and the fact that Rocky won, and it's like how unlikely it is that it won. And she disagreed with me, and she said no. She said it is the perfect movie to win the Academy Award of all those movies. It is the perfect film to win Best Movie out of all those movies. She said it's the epitome of what is or at least what the Academy was looking for a best movie, especially at that period of time.
Interesting.
Sometimes that's a compliment, and sometimes it's an insult.
Right. Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how she took it. I mean, I don't know her, but it was just a back and forth about it because she spotted my tweet.
And you think of some of the other underdog Best Picture movies that won, like Shakespeare in Love, for example, or things like that. Didn't The Artist win its year and everything? Some of the unlikely underdog movies. I mean, this literally was an underdog story. I also remember
the year Chariots of Fire won, also, which was also a sports movie in a sense, but also an underdog story.
Breaking Away, the bicycle movie, of course. Remember, guys, I remember watching. First of all, I saw Rocky in the theater as well, like Bill did, and I'm sure Steve did.
I did also. I saw it in the theater.
Mike, you did as well. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I think I saw it on a drive-in, by the way.
Drive-in. Perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah,
I remember too, and I've seen the footage.
Drive-in movie.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it, and I think we went to like an 8:00 show. We came out, and the line for the late show was wrapped around the block.
Yeah.
I mean, that Rocky was the movie everybody had to see. And, you're bringing up an interesting point by discussing the context within which the movie was released, but also remember it was the bicentennial.
Right.
And this country was in a very celebratory mood. So it was a perfect fit for the mood that this country was in at the time. 200th anniversary, everybody's lighting fireworks. July 4th is a huge celebration. And here you have this movie that ends on a very, very high note, especially compared to the other movies that were nominated.
Yep.
And I think of the, first of all, and I'm sure we were all watching the Oscars when it was up, and Ali and Stallone playfully sparring.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Which is great footage. And I know it's been made into a GIF and everything, or a GIF.
Well, I included the photo in Steve's article of the two of them on stage, and I actually included, if you get the digital edition of Ringside Seat, the actual entire segment on the Oscars. You can watch it if you have the digital edition. You can watch it from YouTube. That's
awesome, absolutely, and a good reminder to everyone. The greatness of this. This is why I love talking to you guys. Whenever there's a new issue out. The other great thing too about the movie, it was made on a shoestring, and isn't it great that they were able to get Joe Frazier, both from a Philadelphia standpoint and the fact as a contemporary fighter standpoint.
Sure.
Oh, that movie is filled with cameos of go back to boxing history. You have Frazier, Al Silvani. There's so much.
Roberto Duran's in it.
Roberto Duran. So much.
Or is that the second one?
First one? I know he's in.
Maybe it's the second one. It's the second one. I'm sorry, my bad.
The second one. And the other thing to watch for is and I noticed this, thanks to Bill and his knowledge, that he's kind of gleaned on to me about Philadelphia, especially about Philadelphia boxing. I'm watching the movie, and Rocky goes into a bar, and there's all these fight posters up, and I'm like, holy shit, I know who that fighter is. Wait, that's Nigel Collins' fighter that he managed right there. That's the poster that I featured in Nigel's article, and there's fights at the Spectrum. There's, fights that in Philadelphia, we just did a Blue Horizon article, so that was really fun to see, something I never would have noticed, in my younger days when I watched it.
Well, you're talking about Rocky ending on an upbeat note as compared to the other movies that were released that year, but that's not the way Stallone originally envisioned the ending. The original scripted ending had Balboa taking a mob bribe to throw the Creed fight. And that's how it was going to end. And fortunately for everybody, Irwin Winkler, the producer of the movie, went to Stallone and said, listen, got to change the ending. Can't have it end like this. This is a disaster. And he ended it the right way. But
he sure did.
Yeah, had Stallone gotten his way about the ending, it would have ended just like all the other movies in 1976 ended. It's very gloomy and downbeat.
Isn't that interesting? That's just like the original Natural book.
Right.
Yep.
And that ends with the bribe and everything rather than the storybook ending we get with Redford and the lights exploding and everything. No, I hear you, man. It's and of course we can never discount the soundtrack that Bill Conti did that is so emblematic, and to this day, people enter the ring with the Rocky fanfare.
I was rewatching Wilder Fury, last night. I wasn't feeling great, so now I'm going to watch the fight again. The third fight, and sure enough, the theme to Rocky's playing.
Yep.
Between rounds.
The other element about it that I love so much, excuse me, and Steve, you touched on this, is that Stallone, his backstory is he really is Rocky, right?
Exactly.
This huge underdog, unemployed or underemployed actor, writes the script, and it's really attractive to the producers. And the biggest thing, and this blows me away to this day, is he had a chance to walk away with $300,000 or in that area just to give it all up, give his rights up, and walk away. And he said, "No, I'm starring in it. It's mine, right?"
Yeah, he told his wife, he said, "I'll bury it in the backyard before I'll sell out."
It's become trite now to say, gamble on yourself, believe in yourself. But wow, what great self-belief it took to do that. And what balls. And that's so great that it worked out for him. And I always link that to that great scene when, excuse me, he's in the Philadelphia bar and Creed is on TV and the bartender starts talking shit about Creed. And the Rocky character says, "Clown, what are you talking about? What did you? He took his shot. What did you ever do?" And it's perfect because that's what Stallone did too. He took his shot.
He sure did.
It comes together so perfectly. And you can say what you will about the rest of the movies and most of his movies, and he has said that he realizes he's sold out, right? Maybe a lot of us would do the same thing, right? But man, that first one, what a home run!
Yeah,
what a home run in every respect.
In every way. I mean, he turns down $340,000.
Yeah,
and he says, "I'm not going to do it." And when you think about the actors that they were considering,
Ryan O'Neal. Yeah,
Burt Reynolds. I mean,
Yeah.
I like Burt Reynolds, but there's no way to take him seriously.
No.
Oh, I'll object to that, guys, because and mildly, but say that I could see Burt Reynolds' Deliverance, Burt Reynolds, and Longest
Yeah,
Yard
that's a good point.
be successful in Rocky.
But you know what? He's Burt Reynolds.
Right.
That's
Right.
the problem. It's
You're
Burt
exactly right.
Reynolds as Rocky Balboa. You had to have someone like Sylvester Stallone, who was a nobody. You didn't know. He becomes Rocky Balboa.
I hear what you're
Michael.
saying.
Yep.
I kind of still think Burt Reynolds was enough of an actor at that moment and wasn't Burt Reynolds the way he became with Smokey and the Bandit and all the cheese that followed that. But yeah, and I mean, beyond that, Ryan O'Neal, I mean, again, Ryan O'Neal, another gritty actor of the moment back then, and a legitimate boxing fan. Didn't he back? Wasn't he like Hedgemon Lewis? Wasn't he like involved in welterweight?
He tried to be a manager, a promoter, and stuff. He was at fights. Actually, there's a picture. I don't remember what fight it is. It's one of Tyson's fights, but it's Ryan O'Neal and Burt Reynolds sitting together at the fight.
As mildly entertaining aside, Ryan O'Neal is Facebook friends with about any boxing fan on Facebook.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he is. He really is, and it's really Ryan O'Neal.
God, it would be.
Is it Ryan O'Neal? Because he friended me. And
really?
Yeah, and it's like
I'm pretty sure it's Ryan O'Neal.
Is it really Ryan O'Neal?
I think it is.
There's a lot of boxing stuff on his Facebook page.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you guys, if it is, regardless, you should seek him out. It would be great to get boxing stories from him, given his involvement with people like the welterweight contender Hedgemon Lewis, and again, just his love of the sport. I bet he's got great stories.
Well,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not him, but I've assumed all along that it is. As odd as that it seems, and improbable as it seems, I kind of think it's him.
Didn't he play a boxer in that movie with Barbara Streisand?
Yes.
The main event. The main event.
Yep.
That is one of the movies I actually rejected as far as a poster goes for Ringside Cinema.
I can't. That's great, but I can't see him as Rocky Balboa. John, I agree with you about Burt Reynolds in Deliverance. He was excellent.
Yeah, no, I like Burt Reynolds too. I just the
one that might have had a shot at it was James Caan.
And I'm glad you mentioned James Caan. I'd forgotten that he was considered as well. Yeah. And again, this is like just after Rollerball, so it's still gritty James Caan, and right after The Gambler and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, there really are very few Hollywood leading men that could bring the physicality necessary to do it. And Bill, I'm so glad you mentioned Duran being in Rocky 2, because that's where you realize how short Stallone is, because they're the same height. And when they're fighting each other, and we all know how tiny Duran is and stuff.
He's a lightweight. 130 pounds. Yeah.
And I love that it's Duran that's boxing circles around Ali. And again, because you're just thinking of, well, Stallone's a heavyweight, that Duran just seems much bigger in perspective and everything fighting him. No, I love that. That's amazing. Very funny, guys. Well, as we talk about heavyweights, we should mention the other great feature here. It's Andrew Harrison?
Yes, Harrison, right.
Oh, it is Harrison. Excuse me. My logo is
that's all right.
Blocking the rest of his name there. But man, I mean, first of all, guys, in general, and we'll talk about what's been going on in the sport lately, but this article obviously does it as well. And we briefly mentioned Fury Wilder 3. Just in general, not only the heavyweight division, but really, I think there have been incredibly competitive fights and very, very solid fights during the fall and into this early winter period that we're in right now. Really going till the end of the year, it's going to be interesting. But really, there have been a lot of satisfying matchups and outcomes, I think.
You know what? I'm starting to think, and it's taken me I was like, I guess it's taken me 40 years to figure this out, that the end of the year always gets really good.
Okay.
And I think it's because promoters realize they have to deliver some big fights before the year is out. Not only they're contractually obligated to their fighters, they want to cash in with some big fights at the end of the year. But there's got to be some reason, and I'm thinking that it seems like the end of the year is always going from the fall into the end of
that's
December.
The absolute truth, because I run the Ringside Seat Twitter account and I feature, the fights on this day. And you hit December, you hit like towards the end of November and December, and it's like I look at the amount of fights that historically have occurred during that time, and it's like, wow. It's like,
so
I can't even cover all these fights.
Yeah, the first 2/3 of the year, boxing fans are bitching and griping. All these fights suck. They're all mismatches. There's nothing good happening. And then the last third of the year, it's fire. And all the big fights are happening, all the good matchups, and everybody's raving about how great this year is ending and what a great sport it is again for a while. And in February, we'll be bitching again until the end of next year.
Right.
That's the way it is.
Well, if we hadn't had the COVID interruptions, we would have had Fury Wilder 3 earlier in the year. And, but talk about this article. Tell us about it, Bill.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I don't know why this didn't get more play, is that we had all the top guys at heavyweight fighting each other at the same time, or virtually at the same time. With these two big fights less than a month apart, we have Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, two top heavyweights, and of course Wilder, or I should say Fury and Wilder 3. Those are the 4 best heavyweights in the world right there, fighting each other within a month of one another, ostensibly toward. Well, it was supposed to be, the grand plan, of course, was for AJ and for all those fights, for those 2 fights to lead to AJ and Fury. But as happens occasionally, Usyk upset the apple cart. I think I and Michael and John and Nigel Collins last time all picked AJ to beat Usyk, didn't we? Or did you pick Usyk, John?
I did pick Usyk. Actually.
Oh, good for you. Okay.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
The rest of us picked Joshua, but so you called that one, and Usyk had no right looking that good because he looked like shit in his prior 2 heavyweight fights, but he looked splendid against AJ, and so that was supposed to lead to again the big super fight between AJ and the winner of Wilder Fury, which we all knew would be Fury, and it was. But again, so now we get a possibly less attractive fight in Usyk Fury down the road, provided Usyk and Joshua fight again, and provided Usyk wins that one like he did the first one. And it's so interesting that the way things are and the way things happen in boxing, Joshua was an overwhelming favorite to win, right? And now there's a mandatory rematch because it was the contract stipulated a rematch clause, and I don't see anybody picking Joshua, because Usyk's win was such that you just can't picture Joshua doing anything to him. But we all were convinced beforehand that Joshua would win, or most of us were convinced beforehand, John, that Joshua would win. But now that we actually see them together and see what happens, nobody can envision a Joshua win under any circumstances. So it's just funny how that works out in boxing. At any rate, it's an excellent piece by Andrew, as all his pieces are.
That's cool. Obviously, Usyk proved that he can get inside of Joshua and also take advantage of that and maybe expose what Andy Ruiz did initially in terms of showing the weakness of his chin, perhaps the fact that if you can push him, he may not respond. I mean, we certainly saw in the Klitschko fight with Anthony Joshua and everything, just the ability to.
But Joshua doesn't know what he wants to be. He's trying to be a boxer, and he was trying to outbox Usyk, I thought, and he's not going to be able to do that. It's like what happened to Wilder. I mean, Joshua being a guy who knocked people out, who intimidated and was using his power. It's like I don't know, Bill. Do you agree? I think he doesn't know what he wants to be.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while. Yeah, that when he's kind of broken my heart, Joshua has, because when he was coming up, he was just a huge puncher, and I saw him as the next great heavyweight puncher, almost in the mold of George Foreman. And he got it into his head, or his trainer did, that he should be a boxer. And maybe that was because he was getting gassed a lot, or he would get tagged, and his chin wasn't great when he got tagged during a slugfest, and he'd get rotted a little bit. At some point, somebody decided he should tone down his slugging instincts and start boxing more. And in my mind, that ruined him. And once you get a fighter, when you try to change his style that dramatically, it screws with his head, and he never knows what to do anymore. And there are examples of that. That come to mind right now immediately. Some fighters can change their style, right? Bernard Hopkins changed his style. Marco Antonio Barrera changed his style. Some guys are able to do that. But Joshua, I don't think can, and he's just confused now. He doesn't know what he wants to do. And the interesting thing about it is, I'm not sure he would do any better against Usyk in an aggressive power punching style, because Usyk is a very good boxer whose strengths, or I should say, his strengths are such that he will usually beat bigger, stronger guys, especially at heavyweight, because he's smaller and quicker. Okay, and that's his style. So, although there was no way Joshua was going to beat him fighting like a boxer, I don't see a lot of reason to believe that he would beat Usyk fighting as a slugger either. But it certainly gives him a better chance in trying to outbox the boxer, in my view. But to answer your question, Michael, yes, he doesn't know really he doesn't know who he is anymore. He doesn't have an identity in the ring anymore, and that's unfortunate.
Conversely, I think Fury is, especially Fury's style, I think he will just do what Fury always does, and that is lean on his opponent like a building and wear him down as much. Hey man,
talking about Usyk?
Yeah, I don't think Usyk can get away from Fury. I mean, I'm really blown away with how great Usyk looked against Joshua, and I do think I like his chances against pretty much every other heavyweight out there. Even Deontay Wilder and his one punch, Mack truck thing. And I want you guys to maybe comment on Wilder's potential future for a moment before we continue with what else is in the magazine. But yeah, I mean, again, Joshua was the right opponent for Usyk. Yeah. I don't think he can beat Tyson Fury personally.
I don't know. I haven't given it enough thought yet to say, but I tend to think you're right. I think off the top of my head, I think I would go with Fury in that fight, John.
I think Fury. I agree. I think Fury has too much skill. He has too much power. He's too big. I mean, he is carrying 277 pounds in that fight, and he didn't look tired. He didn't look winded.
He's so relaxed. That's why he's very relaxed and very confident. He's not
confident in his style, in the way that Joshua is.
I mean, you can see that even when he got knocked down. Yeah. The 2 times he got knocked down, he wasn't panicking. I think he's too much for anybody I can think of right now. But I think Usyk's going to beat Joshua in the rematch.
Yeah, I would tend to think so also.
Any thoughts, Steve? Or
you guys are way ahead of me. I've seen Tyson Fury fight. I'm glad he cleaned up his act. I think he cleaned up his act anyway.
Yeah, he did.
Seems like it.
But I would say he's probably unbeatable at this point, simply because of his sheer power.
The Fury Wilder fight reminded me a lot, and in fact, as we talked about it coming up, I saw it as a heavyweight version of Hagler Hearns, and you guys have a great excerpt from Don Stradley's wonderful book, The War, that obviously points out that great middleweight epic, and there's a great picture of Marvin and Tommy Hearns. I mean, that was only 2.5 rounds of explosive, stuff, and certainly Wilder Fury managed to last through 11 rounds. But yeah, what a great book by Don. I intend to to talk to him, and I'm glad you guys excerpted. It doesn't surprise me because Don does contribute to the magazine regularly.
Right.
But yeah, man, when boxing was boxing, when Hagler and Hearns fought each other, it really was probably the best moment of the 80s, wouldn't you guys say, in terms of boxing?
Well, it's hard to beat it. It was such a great era, right? And there were so many great fights during that period.
Oh, yeah.
But we're still talking about Hagler Hearns 30 years later, right?
Yeah.
So it's got to be pretty memorable, right? Yeah.
For me, Leonard Duran won is pretty fun.
That was a great moment, and Leonard Hearns was up there. Yeah.
Yep. No,
yeah, but Don's book is very good, as Don's work always is. And it was about time that somebody wrote a book about this wonderful fight. And Don did a wonderful job.
He's a great writer. He used to do a lot of pieces for Noir City. And his perception of film noir and his take on film noir was always very interesting.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
Yeah. Don can write about just about anything, really.
Don can write about anything.
God, we talked about Joe Palooka in the last time we all got together.
Right, yeah.
And Don, even after we were done, Don and I talked for like another 20 minutes about Joe Palooka and stuff. No, it's great. And again, back to what Steve was saying in terms of the negative connotation that boxing has. Hey, it's part of boxing's history. We can't deny that.
No.
And I think Don brings that combination of the noir-y kind of grit of boxing along with the sport, and always manages to convey that in his pieces and in his books. I love that book he talks about with the history of Boston and a lot of the lesser fighters that really were mob guys in their day job and were fighting in the 40s and 50s and 60s, even 70s, I suppose, and didn't have the best endings to their lives and stuff. But yeah, it's great.
Well, what about the article that Don wrote for us about the obscure Italian singer who was a horrible boxer? It's like, I don't know. I where did he find this guy? It's a really fascinating piece, and it's in issue,
I want to say 2 issues ago, 3 issues maybe.
13, 14 maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, John, the website is ringsideseatmag.com. No.
God bless it. All right, let me fix that. Sorry, my apologies.
It should be magazine, I guess, but it's mag.
Hold on. We'll take care of that right now.
Nigel has a great descriptor of Don's prose style, and it's breezy. And it's true, and especially true because no matter how dark the subject matter is, Don's prose remains breezy, even when it's dark, which is a really interesting juxtaposition, right? He's a very good writer.
He's an excellent writer.
Absolutely, man. All right, now tell me about this piece. Leonard Doran, Jamie Rebner writing this piece. I don't know Leonard Doran. Tell us the story.
You don't remember him, John? From okay, he was. I think he probably peaked in his fight against Paul Spadafora. Remember Spadafora, the lightweight out of Pittsburgh?
Sure.
Okay, he had a great fight with Paul Spadafora. He came from Romania as an amateur and competed. Or I should say, when he turned pro, he came from Romania and settled in Canada. He had won. He had medaled at the last 2 Olympics in Romania, or for Romania. Came to Canada and won a title in the lightweight division. And I think I wanted to include the piece mostly because there's so much doom and gloom in boxing, Steve, and not only in film, but in journalism too, right? There's so much doom and gloom, and it's because there are so many awful endings. I think I wanted to include this mostly because it's kind of a happy ending.
Yeah.
Doreen isn't punchy. or broke by any accounts, and he hasn't been in jail. He doesn't. We don't, as far as we know, he's not beating his wife or children, and he seems fairly content in retirement, and that's fairly rare. And I like to highlight it. I'm drawn to the dark stuff, but I like to highlight it when we come across an ending that isn't awful. And so I wanted to include this piece on Leonard Doreen, who was an action fighter, face first guy, not a big puncher, stereotypical pressure fighter, just threw a lot of punches. And if you want to be entertained, John, and you've got a good 40 minutes to do nothing, go to YouTube and put in Doreen versus Spadafora, which was a title unification fight. And I won't give away, unless you've read the piece. You probably know the ending.
No, it was
fight,
great, great story, absolutely, man. And no, I would like to watch the fight.
Yeah.
So, but thank God, man. During the pandemic, I really leaned on YouTube for old fights, just to give myself something to enjoy. And it was such a pleasure watching some of these great fights. And in fact, a photograph that popped up on Facebook that I put on my Twitter feed, and I'm trying to get it for us to look at for a moment, but that fight with Spadafora and Doreen reminded me of a period when Duran, right before he fought Iran Barkley, fought twice in Chicago. Or actually, the second fight was not in Chicago, but he had 2 tune-up fights before the Barkley fight. One of them was in Chicago against a hometown favorite, Jeff Lannis, who was a really solid middleweight back then. And Duran just, was looking for an easy fight, and nobody told Jeff Lannis, and he really pushed him. And it was a split decision. It should have been a split decision because Lannis fought his ass off. And, Duran's obviously on his way to a contendership. This is where a little chicanery is going on, and one's going to get in the way of the big promotion and stuff. That's a shame. But also, he fought Paul Thorne on USA Boxing, and I forget where they were fighting. And Paul Thorne had an interesting chapter after his fighting career. Great singer-songwriter, and I've listened to his music, and it's really, really good. And he really kind of had a nice little career making his music after pushing Duran again to a decision, and Paul Thorne looking really good against an disinterested Roberto Duran.
That's interesting.
I think it mildly.
Yeah. Duran was up and down like that. If he wasn't motivated, I don't know if you remember his fight against, what's really going back, Nino Gonzalez back in the day. Remember a TV fight?
Was that the cruiserweight fight?
No. I think it was at junior welter.
Okay.
Or welter, and a lot of people thought Gonzalez won that fight because when he wasn't really interested, he didn't fight like himself. Of course, put down to those competition.
And was getting tagged. I mean, that's the thing in these kind of fights and everything. Absolutely, was getting tagged. So it was pretty crazy. And that, and both the Thorne fight and the Lannis fight are on YouTube. And do you guys remember the cable channel Score? They used to show so many boxing matches back in the 80s and stuff and early 90s.
Yep.
Oh, my God. It drove me crazy because in Chicago, or at least in suburban Chicago where I was living, this is back in the days where cable companies would piggyback other channels at night from what you got during the daytime. And I think Score was tied to some financial network because they'd run commercials for Score all the time. And I'd never get the fights because they would switch to another channel in the evening. And I'm like, you're killing me, man. I'd call my cable company. I'm like, I want to see these fights. What the hell? This is back when Foreman was fighting nobodies.
Right.
Who was doing the announcing? Because I remember USA. I watched all the USA fights on USA.
Oh, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's on that Duran Jeff Lannis fight. Hugh something, and it's an American. I can't think of his name. Was it Mulvaney? No, that's the British guy.
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of his name, man. But it was so great. And, man, I mean, it's the Duran Lannis fight. It was in Illinois. I knew all the officials. I knew the ref, good old Stanley Berg back in the day. It was. And also, damn it. I can't think of his name right now. The guy, he was the press guy for the IBC. Ben Bentley is the ring announcer. And Ben is crusty old, literally knew where all the bodies were buried for the IBC because he was their press guy and stuff. And I know I haven't. I got to grab it. There's another announcement from Ringside Seat that you guys made that I've got to show the cover. So before we talk about it, I will get the cover and I'll bring it up. But also great article about Simon Brown in the thing, and I love Simon Brown, one of my favorite welterweights from back in the day.
Yeah, Simon was a great fighter, and Nigel does a great job on him here. He just visits him during Simon's induction into a regional Hall of Fame, and reviews his career. And Simon takes him through it. There's some especially poignant moments in that article, particularly when Simon talks about Don Elbaum, who was his first promoter, who's still looking to make fights in his 90s that he'll never make because that's Don Elbaum, and he's just that kind of guy. But he's still around in his 90s, kicking and talking shit, and he was Simon Brown's first promoter. So there's some nice stuff in there about Simon remembering what Don Elbaum did for him, and it's a typical good, solid, excellent Nigel Collins feature.
Don's a Cleveland, or was a Cleveland promoter, correct?
I
always thought of him as that. Maybe not.
I mean, at some point, I knew he was everywhere. He was in Philly for a long time, and I Maryland maybe. It makes sense that he would be. I think.
Yeah, that's
Maryland.
what I thought it was.
Yeah.
It was the Maryland area,
Yeah.
I just my favorite Don Elbaum story is when it was near the end of Sugar Ray Robinson's career, and Don was the promoter, and he made a big special presentation that he had a pair of gloves, and he's like, Ray, don't ask me how I got them, but these are the gloves you wore in your first professional fight. And it looked great in the display and everything, and Ray's getting all teary and stuff. And someone in the press is like, hey, Ray, put the gloves back on. And Elbaum's like, no, just show the gloves. They're fine the way they are. And what he didn't want everyone to realize was they were both like left-handed gloves.
Yeah. And you can bet your ass that they weren't Sugar Ray Robinson's first gloves. That's typical Elbaum. He's one of the great bullshitters in this sport. When I worked at the Ring, he was one of my favorite sources. I'd call him up, and he'd always have some great stories to tell. And when I left, which was, I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that. I don't know anymore how long it's been. I hadn't talked to him since, and I talked to him about a month ago. And in his 90s, sharp as ever, still talking shit, still talking about the next big card he's going to be promoting, and it's all bullshit. But that's just Don Elbaum. He's a real character. And the great line that Nigel has in that piece about Elbaum is that he's outlived his sins.
Yeah, that was great.
It is great because he screwed over a lot of guys. He screwed over a lot of fighters and a lot of people in the business. That's just
Simon Brown still had nice things to say about him.
Yeah, exactly right.
And credited him for his career.
Do we think there's hope for King and Aram as they reach 90 to
outlive their sins?
Yeah,
not King.
I'm saying
no. Not King. He's at a bigger scale than
and not Aram either.
I kind of think Aram as well. No, I agree with you, Steve. That's awesome. Yeah,
neither of them.
Good stuff, gentlemen. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Before we leave, I don't know if we're going to leave the issue or not, but before we do, Bill, I really liked your piece about Donald Curry.
That was the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Found it to be very provocative.
Thank you.
Very interesting. You mentioned something in the article toward the end about the fact that the NFL and Major League Baseball provide pension funds for their participants and for the people that leave the sport, but don't ever think that boxing will do the same thing.
It'll never happen.
The question was, why not?
There's no financial incentive to. There's no financial incentive to, and the athletes have no way to force it. It's just never going to happen. There's no financial incentive. There's no reason for them to do it.
There's no union. Yeah, I mean, the baseball players have a union, very strong union. The baseball union is incredibly strong. Football, fairly strong. But those unions are strong and there for them. But it's like there's no boxing union. There's nothing.
And there never will be. There never will be.
Yeah,
I read it and I'm thinking, well, football players fight under the umbrella of the NFL. Baseball players fight under the umbrella of Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm. What's the umbrella in the boxing? There isn't.
The WBA and the WBO, to set aside whatever differences they may have.
They're all crooked. They're all crooked.
Yeah.
They're all crooked.
Goes
They're
back
all-
to
They're all want money and they're cooking.
this is the dark side of boxing, but I found your article to be very thought provoking.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you guys remember in the early 2000s when Senator McCain was trying really hard. At least it appeared to be, because this is when I was working at Sporting News Radio, and the great broadcaster James Brown had a daily show with us, and we set up an interview with Senator McCain and tried to get him to talk about, he was pushing very hard for there to be a federal boxing commission, and one of the things that he wanted to see was a pension set aside. And he's like, come on, with all the fights in Nevada and in Atlantic City and the rest of the US, he goes, there's money, you could do it, and of course,
There's plenty of money, but there's no will to.
no incentive.
No
incentive.
Do you remember the organization? Jerry Cooney was involved in it. Your favorite guy, Michael. I want to say like 15 or 20, everything's 15 years ago with me. I don't know why that is. 15, 20 years ago. Remember the organization FIST? Remember hearing about that?
Yes.
Yep.
You know that's gone, right? You never hear anything about that.
Right.
You know why?
I don't hear about it. I didn't know it was gone officially, but I don't hear
it. It's been gone for years. You know why? The treasurer took off with all the money.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
That's boxing. Okay.
Yeah.
That's boxing.
That is
and there's no political will or financial incentive for there to be any kind of federal commission or pension plan or health benefits organization or anything like that. And there shouldn't be. And why should boxing be the only sport that has a federal watchdog or a federal board? All these other professional sports have their shit together, except because it's just not going to. Do taxpayers really want to pay to make boxing, to clean up boxing? I don't. I wouldn't. If this is the way the sport wants to be, this is the way the sport wants to be.
And just the whole idea of federal control would be offensive to me.
Exactly right. And who would run it? A bunch of Washington
bureaucrats,
right? It'd be awful.
Right. It would end
terrible.
It would end up being crooked. Bill's editorial, I think whether you're a boxing fan or not should read it. We should have it up on the website, because the discussion of like coverage for people, just everyone, anybody who works, that they should be able to have the coverage, medical coverage that they need.
There are two main things that I want to talk about in the piece, and one is this sense that some boxing fans have that we're all complicit whenever a fighter is really compromised after his career is over, and it happens all the time. Happens to hundreds of guys that we don't even know about.
Yeah,
who are all screwed up and are living awful lives after their careers are over because of the punches they took to the head. And a lot of fans, we're complicit. This is partly our fault because we watched the fights and blah blah. And the sport has to do better, and it is the sport's fault, and so forth. And I don't believe that's the case. That it's the sport's fault or the sport has to take care of these people, because every fighter makes a deal with boxing, and boxing gets out of the fighter what it wants, money, and the fighter, if he's good enough, gets out of boxing what he wants, which is also money, right? And that's the understanding from the start. Nobody says to the boxer when he's 12 years old, okay, now just so you know, there's a likelihood that you're going to be fucked up when this is done, and we're going to take care of you, and here's the contract. That doesn't happen.
No.
We roll the dice. That's just the way it is. We roll the dice.
Yeah.
And we hope that it works out well. Sometimes it does. Look at Leonard Doreen, right? Sometimes it does. And there are probably a fair amount of those too. There are lots. In fact, there are many, many successful stories involving guys who boxed and got out before
Caleb Truax is one.
Sure. And not even guys that you've never heard of, amateur guys, and who were kids, and boxing really helped them out, right? Kept them off the streets, gave them an outlet for their aggression and so forth, right?
True.
Hundreds and thousands of guys fall into that category, right? But there are these awful stories where boxing just ruins guys, and it happens all the time. And boxing won't take care of them because boxing is acting just like the United States of America does, which is to say, it's not really our problem. Go get a job where you can get private insurance coverage and go, I don't know, or die or something. Just go. It's not really our problem.
Do you guys go ahead, Bill? Excuse me.
That's all right. And so my point was that boxing really doesn't have any it sounds harsh, but doesn't have any moral responsibility to take care of these fighters. It just doesn't. It doesn't say up front that they're going to.
The new wrinkle that concerns me is the CTE situation,
Right.
and we've seen it invade football, and I think we're seeing a slow march to some sort of change in football. I don't know how long it's going to take, but what do you think of boxing and CTE?
Well, it's existed for as long as there's been boxing.
But we didn't know about it until, I mean, we called it punch drunk, and
that's been around since the 40s and 30s, and we've been known. Everybody's known about it. The new situation is in football. They're just talking about football now, but we've known about it in boxing for 100 years, right? And it's never nobody's ever done anything about it because they're just boxers.
But now there really is more tangible evidence. When Ali, and I might have mentioned this before when we've all talked, when Ali died, I was on a couple sports radio shows, and I was saying, I know it's against Ali's religion, but I really wish Ali's family would allow a autopsy of Ali to see if there was evidence of CTE. I knew, and I know I've discussed this before, a heart surgeon that I knew who worked here in Chicago when Ali was in Chicago saw an Ali CAT scan and saw what he just described as head trauma. I don't know if that also would have been diagnosed as CTE if they had cut Ali open the way they have various football players and the like.
Yeah, I don't know. And what's the end game there?
Yeah, right. We know what happened to him. We see the result of too many blows to the head that he took.
Yes.
Yeah,
you know, and again, that was his decision to keep going and keep fighting and to keep unretiring and fight more. But we know what happened to him. We know that it was the result of boxing.
Understood.
His particular condition was a Parkinson's syndrome,
Right.
not CTE, and even though there might have been some of that also, John, going on. But I think the general consensus from a medical standpoint is, in order for him to have Parkinson's syndrome when he did, there was probably some genetic predisposition toward Parkinson's, but the punishment that he got brought it on much sooner than it would have otherwise. Like he might have gotten it when he was 70 as opposed to when he was 45
Understood.
or whatever he was, right?
Yep.
But the other thing about my piece that I try to make a case for is just that there's so much money in this country that guys like Donald Curry shouldn't exist. Guys with brain damage, yes, that's going to happen because we like boxing, right? But not who can't afford to get medical care, who can't afford any kind of assistance, if he wants it, by the way. And that's a big part of it also. I get the impression that Donald Curry is resistant to this kind of stuff, like a lot of guys are. They feel like they're okay and you don't need this and you don't need that.
Yep.
But anybody in this country, in my view, who wants any kind of medical care that he or she needs and that is prescribed by a doctor should have it, just by virtue of being a citizen of this country. It's not like there's no money. It's not like there's no money. We can't afford it. Of course we can. We can afford it 10 times over.
That's why everyone should read Bill's. That's why everyone should read Bill's piece.
Everybody should read it. You underscore the greed of the medical establishment. You underscore the naked, ignominious greed of big pharma, obviously. I mean, that is why people aren't getting the care that they need. But it's a sad statement about boxing that guys like Donald Curry exist. I think
it's a sad statement about a sadder statement about our society.
True. But it's also a sad statement about boxing because this is the kind of thing I used to hear years ago when people would start talking about outlawing boxing. Let's outlaw boxing. Getting back to just film for a minute, Mark Robeson, who directed Champion and The Harder They Fall, insisted on outlawing boxing. He hated boxing, and he made it very clear that he hated it. And he enjoyed directing those two movies because they conveyed the message that he wanted those movies to convey, that boxing is evil, it's wrong, and it destroys people.
True. And good transition, Steve, into, because I wanted to acknowledge the great work Mike did on Ringside Cinema, this fantastic book that just came out as well. And man, a great exploration. Some of these great boxing movie posters of the years. I mean, look at this beautiful art just on the two covers, the front and back cover and stuff. And we've got bigger examples that we could look at as well. And it's funny that you mentioned that, Steve, about what Robeson thought of for both Champion and The Harder They Fall. Bud Schulberg told me he hated that ending to the movie where you see Bogey kind of write the start of the editorial that boxing should either get a federal commission or be banned.
Right.
And Bud said that wasn't my intent with the book, and that certainly wasn't my intent. He wrote the screenplay and then objected to some of the changes they wanted to make. They took his name off, and Philip Yorkin gets the credit. But Bud says he really did, or had said back in the 90s when I talked to him, that he really did write the screenplay as well. And he had been writing screenplays, obviously, Harder They Fall and Facing the Crowd and things like that.
Great writer. I wrote a piece for Ringside Seat about The Harder They Fall, and I remember quoting Bud Schulberg about that. Yeah, he did hate that ending.
Yep. There's the great German poster for Harder They Fall.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about Michael's book was that he included a lot of foreign movie posters. And as a movie poster collector, I collected movie posters, not boxing posters, but I did collect movie posters. And there are so many occasions in which the foreign poster for a Hollywood film is better aesthetically and is more vivid than the American poster for a Hollywood film.
Absolutely.
Well, and like Eddie mentioned in his introduction, he talked about. See if I can find this now. He mentioned that he also agreed with you about the posters, European posters being better because European posters relied more on art,
Yes.
But he specifically talked about the American poster for Somebody Up There Likes Me, which is about the life of Rocky Graziano, and the Italian poster. And I had them side by side, and he talked about
that's great. Yeah, the photograph of Paul Newman.
So the American poster makes it look like a musical comedy. Okay. And it does.
Right. Hold on, Mike. There you go. Yep.
Eddie was absolutely right. And then when you look at
look at
the
that
Italian poster, it's this gritty boxing film about
absolutely, man.
Rocky Graziano.
Yeah. My buddy Gabe Hardman, who's a great storyboard artist. His passion is finding old movie posters as well. And he's got a ton of boxing ones. And again, as you guys say, the foreign markets, it's the Polish artists and the German artists and the Italian artists and a lot of these other countries where the symbolism really comes through in the paintings that they do. I mean, God, I love this for Requiem for a Heavyweight. And again, that's British,
God, which they changed the title to Blood Money.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I love that.
Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Gleason was fantastic. Yeah,
he's so great in that.
Jackie Gleason was fantastic.
And of course, the movie starts out with Cassius Clay, fighting
Anthony Quinn. Yeah,
fighting Anthony Quinn. And what's interesting is there's a fight poster actually when Quinn is in an alley and he goes and he's looking at his poster and it's Cassius Clay versus Mountain Markham, right? That's his name.
I always get confused by the Palance version of TV and the Quinn version because Mountain Rivera. Okay.
And but there are. What's cool is I've seen photos of Ali at the Fifth Street Gym when he was training, specifically when he was on his comeback trail and leading up to the Quarry fight. And there's photos of him at the gym, and that poster is up on the wall of the gym.
Oh, that the Blood Money poster here?
No, the poster from the prop poster of Mountain Rivera versus Cassius Clay.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's amazing.
I ought to post it on the Twitter account for people to see.
Oh, God. Bill, I know Bill sometimes needs to go away and stuff because I do want to talk more about the book, but also I wanted to talk about all the lightweight activity we've had in the last couple of weeks that has, I think, complicated the lightweight division more than it has cleared up the picture with Kambosos beating Teofimo Lopez.
Well, that was great, wasn't it?
It was beautiful. So satisfying.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really was.
Oh, God, yes.
I've never seen anybody kill a great deal of goodwill so quickly as Teofimo did. That was great. And for Kambosos to beat him like he did, it was just fabulous. Yeah.
But now, and I guess Lomachenko obviously last weekend doing so
great.
well.
Yep.
And Tank
He
Davis
looked
fighting
fantastic.
Tank
Ringside.
Davis doing well.
His last 2 fights, he's looked great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, now it's more complicated, I think, than a clear picture in terms of. I mean, I don't know who the top. I mean, it's so funny. A lot of reporters have anointed now Kambosos the top man, beating Lopez. But again, it's like I mean, an amazing performance.
Sure was.
Using everything in Lopez's arsenal, it still might have just been a bad night for Lopez,
Sure.
who just didn't get started and
And
found himself.
who apparently had some kind of injury going into that was fairly serious. But here's the great thing: we get to find out, if we're lucky, who the best guy is because they're fighting each other,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I don't mind not having a like a clear top dog in a division, as long as
Agreed.
we're progressing toward that and we're getting good fights along the way, trying to find out. And Kambosos seems like the guy who's willing to fight anybody. We know that Loma will fight anybody. Tank Davis is fighting good guys. Les Skyfall is a very tough guy. These guys aren't playing around. When we did that cover a couple issues ago with all the
Yes.
lightweights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, good. Mike's reaching for it. That's
There you
good. I'm
go.
glad, Mike, because I didn't think to put it up for this conversation. And that's the great thing, man. No, you guys are right on. This is what I love about your magazine. You guys are right on top of what's going on. And, I mean, obviously these fights were already announced, but it's just great to see that, you're pointing out, hey, man, this is really where the juice is right now. There we go.
We got a little bit of shit from people saying, "Oh, if only these guys would fight each other," and blah blah blah. Well, guess what? These guys are fighting each other. We just had Haney against JoJo. That was a good fight.
Yeah.
So these guys are fighting each other, and as long as there's money out there, they'll continue to fight each other, and it's fun. And again, I don't care if there's no top dog, because the process by which we determine the top dog is good for everybody.
How about that Bud Crawford fight? And man, God, the frustration in Sean Porter's when he's pounding the canvas and he just knows, man, I blew it. Fuck. I mean, literally, you can hear his brain just screaming that.
Yeah.
And just the weirdness of his dad.
That was a weird thing.
So bizarre. That was so bizarre. That interview was just so bizarre.
Yeah, I watched that fight with our good friend Nigel and my good friend and our columnist Eric Raskin, and toward the end of the fight, Eric made an observation that stays with me. He said that there are two guys who apparently, no matter how far behind they get in the fight, no matter how late it is in the fight, they just had this sense of confidence that they'll get him. I'm going to get this guy sooner or later, and those two guys are Canelo and Crawford.
Yes.
It's deep into a fight at the 10th round, and they're like, I'll get him. And they do. And the best part of the Crawford fight for me was when he was told in his corner that
was great.
the TV judges had Porter up. And he was like, what? How? And he said, okay. And he went out there and took care of business. And that was great. That's what you want to see in a fighter.
100%, man.
And arguably, Canelo, Crawford
are the two best fighters in the world. Exactly right.
In the world.
Right.
What do we
go deep into a fight and be like, I'll get him eventually, and they do.
They do. I not to strut boys, but truly had both of them winning by late round knockouts, betting wise, and was very satisfied that I was right. And also, what do you think of Crawford or Canelo's flirtation with the cruiserweights?
He's going to get paid, and he's going to beat a guy. No, he'll fight. He's going to fight this one cruiserweight, but he's not going to fight a very good cruiserweight.
It's like when Roy Jones fought John Ruiz back in the day and everything. And as I pointed out on sports radio nationally, I'm like, he beat a heavyweight champion, not the heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's an accomplishment, but it's a small A accomplishment. And no disrespect to either Roy back in the day or Canelo, right, if he does it and succeeds. I mean, I do think Usyk, I would love to see Usyk fight Canelo. I think Usyk would be too much for Canelo to beat. And I know Usyk has moved on to heavyweight, but has acknowledged, hey, if he wants to fight me at 190, I'll do it, but I'm not fighting him in any catch weight.
Yeah. That's a very weird discussion in itself. But he's going to fight a decent cruiserweight, and he'll probably win, and then he'll go back down to middleweight or super middleweight where he belongs, and it'll be fine.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I wonder if he'll ever. Do you think he'll ever go back to middleweight, or is he?
Yeah, I think he's a super middleweight and let
That's
him
what I
make
was
the rest of
thinking.
his career.
I can't see him going back to middleweight, probably.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
and the concern, and you can point to Roy Jones was, yes, he went up in weight, and then when he came back down, he took muscle off, and was kind of never the same again. I mean, that's when he was really struggling with the Glenn Johnsons and the Antonio Tarvers and people like that. And
Yeah, that's the common theory around why he fell apart when he did.
What do you think,
I
Bill?
don't know. It seemed very sudden, like somebody flipped a switch and suddenly he couldn't take a punch at all anymore. He lost all his punch resistance.
His speed, his defensive speed seemed to not be there. All of a sudden he was available for shots that earlier at middleweight and super middleweight and even early light heavyweight, he was able to dodge effective punchers and stuff. And then all of a sudden, I mean, that's how I saw it. That almost maybe his leg speed, because he was never a guy that would keep his hands up.
No.
He would kind of juke around with his shoulders. Well, look at the fat guy trying to pretend to be a right hand, but you know what I mean. And,
yeah, sure.
That was the thing. But I do appreciate that thought that maybe he did lose muscle weight, and that made a difference as well. I don't know.
Well, that leads me to this question. If losing that muscle weight hurt him, how did he put the muscle weight on so quickly?
All right.
Right.
Isn't it true that when a fighter loses it, he loses it? It's almost like an overnight thing.
It mostly is true, but what I'm kind of getting at there is that Roy was busted for using performance enhancing drugs at least once against Richard Hall. In fact, I think they both tested dirty, and it's not natural for a guy to gain 20 pounds of muscle in like 6 months. You know,
how long did it take Holyfield with Mackie?
Oh God, forget about it.
Yeah.
Holyfield is
he's the poster child for it.
Yeah, exactly right. And there are people who, and this is a whole pet peeve of mine also, that people hate fighters who take performance enhancing drugs unless it happens to be their favorite fighter. Right.
I had no idea Holyfield. I mean, I knew he was a dirty fighter. He would butt people and shit like that. And I won't deny that. I mean, you can't help but love Evander if you're
sure. He's a fighter. Yeah,
just a sweet guy. Very, very sweet guy, as my experiences in the 90s with him were. But that's really interesting. I didn't know.
Michael's phrasing is perfect. He's the poster boy for performance enhancing drugs.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Look up what was his name in the Sports Illustrated article where he was getting what was his Evan what was it? I can't think of.
Can't say.
There's a Sports Illustrated article where some Balco lab got busted, and they found a name that was very similar to his, and a phone number, and where some things were getting delivered. Okay, and the FBI called it, and he answered the phone. Evan Fields. I'm sorry, Evan Fields. Okay, the name of the client was Evan Fields.
Outstanding.
Okay? Yeah. And they called it, and he picked it up, and it was him. But they never, for some reason, it was never pursued.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Fighters losing it immediately and never the same. Back to Donald Curry when he lost to McCallum, right?
Yeah, that was it was when he lost to Lloyd Hunnigan.
Oh no, Lloyd Hunnigan. Yes, and that's the image, man. Just that glassy look on his face when he's on the canvas. He burned in my brain, and yes, it was Lloyd Hunnigan. Of course,
he did lose it all at once. And with him, though, it was also he would party a lot and then come into camp really overweight and have to lose a shitload of weight really fast, that kind of thing. And he did that a lot, and that'll shorten your prime real quick. And you remember John when he was at the top of his game, man, what a fighter he was.
Oh, the next Sugar Ray.
Yeah, he really was great. He was great.
Yes, absolutely, man. No,
but there's your prototype, Michael, for guys losing it all at once. So you came into the ring against Hunnigan, which was never the same guy again.
Unbelievable. Yeah, man. Very, very amazing. And I think of, wasn't it Simon Brown and Marlon Starling? Didn't he knock out Starling, and Starling didn't realize he had been knocked out?
Thomas Molinaro knocked out Starling, and Starling didn't realize it. Yeah,
was that when Larry Merchant, when he said, what are you talking about? I wasn't even knocked down. And it's like, thank you, Marlon. Oh my God, Jesus. Again, Bill, I don't want to keep you. If Mike and Steve wanted to talk more about the
If
posters,
Bill
I'm
wants
happy
to stay, it's up to Bill. If
Yeah, I
if
don't
he'd
want
like to
Oh,
stay,
you know what? The poster book is Michael's baby, so I'm going to let you guys talk about this. And I haven't seen the whole thing, but man, I've seen the cover and some of the inside, and it looks absolutely fabulous. And great job, Michael, as always with this stuff. It looks absolutely great.
thanks,
And
Bill.
I hope it's selling a lot of copies because it deserves to, and you deserve to reap the benefits. So I'll let
100%.
you guys talk about this, and I'll catch you next time.
Bill, as always, really appreciate your time, man, and your points
Anytime.
of view. So take
Thank
it
you.
easy, man.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, guys. It's like good seeing you, Steve. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Later, man. And again, as we were saying, you can buy the magazine and the book at Amazon.com or RingsideSeatMag.com. And yeah, man, let's Michael, what do you want to say about some of these other amazing photos? I mean, I know that the setup, your absolute favorite boxing movie of all time. And
Yeah, I figured what I did was I sent you, I think I sent you posters, lobby cards from my 5 favorite boxing movies, which are The Setup, Raging Bull, Fat City, Body and Soul, and Requiem for a Heavyweight. So actually, that
oh, you want to go back to Fat City?
yeah, so that's an Italian poster for Fat City. Fat City, the American poster is actually just kind of like a replica in a way of the design for the book cover for Leonard Gardner's book, which is an amazing book, arguably the greatest boxing novel ever written, one of the greatest boxing novels ever written. And Leonard Gardner also wrote the screenplay for the Houston movie.
Yeah, and John Huston directed it.
Right.
My favorite, I brought, because I wasn't sure what to bring. I didn't have any photos of George Foreman, but he was fighting an exhibition in Indiana, I believe, and I brought a copy of Fat City for him to autograph, and he said, "This is my favorite book." I'm so
Oh, really? Foreman said that?
George Foreman said that.
That's
Absolutely,
great.
man.
That's great.
And it was cool. And again, it's just another wrinkle of why it's like George Foreman, a lot smarter than people realize, and a really deep guy beyond just being an explosive puncher and stuff.
I loved him on HBO. I so missed him when he left HBO.
Agreed.
Yeah.
No, a lot of fun. And I know I've mentioned this before. I would talk to him in the press room, and he'd get much more serious and analytical, especially during the Barrera Morales fights, I believe. And I always get it wrong if it wasn't Barrera.
No, you're right.
It was Barrera. Okay. And yeah, and he loved Eric Morales and got very technical, explaining why he felt Eric was a better fighter. And we finished, and I stopped the recorder, and I'm like, I like this George Foreman more than I like the HBO George Foreman. I'm like, how come you don't get this like detailed and serious? And he's like, they got Larry to be the serious guy. They got Lampley to be the play-by-play guy. They want me to be the funny guy. I'm happy.
So he was an actor, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he just leaned into it. Again, even during the fights, he would make his points.
Throughout George's life, he portrayed different things. He was a certain way in the time that he was an amateur and in the Olympics. He was a guy who was part of what was the organization that he was a part of in Houston when he was a kid?
The Job Corps?
I think the Job Corps.
Yeah.
And then, with the American flag, during the Olympics, when Tommy Smith and
John Carlos
had their fists in the air. So
yeah, Black Power.
There was that George Foreman, and then there was the mean Sonny Liston like George Foreman when he started his career as a heavyweight and became champion.
Yeah,
and then the George Foreman after boxing, as the preacher. So the many faces of George Foreman. Someday someone is going to write a really great biography of George. They're going to really delve into him and write a really great, because he's a fascinating character. He really is.
Yeah, and needs to do it while he's still alive.
Oh, absolutely. Because
he probably blast it, say it's not true.
We'll do it in the form of a memoir and include him and collaborate.
But you're gonna get. See, I think you're not going to get the truth from him. He's already written a book about himself. He's already written an autobiography, a memoir.
Well, that's why I want him. And again, forgive me for getting political for a second, but he has come out to be a conservative guy,
Yeah.
and yet in his youth, he was directly benefited by a Lyndon Johnson program like the Job Corps, and he even said that in the great Champions Forever documentary, where he said, "I am the product of a compassionate society. The Job Corps kept me from being a criminal, and he helped me clean up my act and understand responsibility and be a better citizen." And it's like, okay, man, well, that was because of a liberal, government program that kind of goes, in the face of
he still talks about his youth, that he was in a lot of trouble, and that that program got him a job and got him out of everything. So he's just an interesting guy. He's just another fascinating, character. And I hope that one day someone will write a very honest book about his life. It doesn't, and I don't mean dirt. I'm not looking.
No, it's a great story.
I just find him a fascinating. When I was a kid, I loved George Foreman. I mean, the fight that got me into boxing was Foreman Lyle. That was the fight.
Wow.
That made me a boxing nut.
What a fight. Good Lord. One of the best 70s fights. It's so funny. Raskin said, was it Raskin who on Twitter, beyond Holmes and Tyson, who was the best of the rest of all the great heavyweight contenders of the 80s? That maybe held the title briefly, but weren't the dominant heavyweight of the 80s. And it was a terrific list. It was Witherspoon, Dokes, Pinklin Thomas, Coetzee, various people and stuff. I thought Eric Raskin asked it, and my response, and I wonder what your guys is, I'm like, Tim Witherspoon was the best of the rest. He had the most tools. Obviously, they all had cocaine problems, which kept them from succeeding beyond what they did. But my only other possible top guy on that list was Michael Dokes, because nobody was tougher than Michael Dokes, and he certainly proved it when he did clean up and finally fight Holyfield, as he did as an older contender.
There were so many. I mean, there was Mike Weaver.
Sure. But I think Witherspoon was better than Weaver. I think a lot of these guys.
Witherspoon had some skill, but it's like he never could put it all together in like a group of fights where he like. It was just so spread out in the 80s. I mean, you had Tyson had to come in and kind of clean it all up and become, the heavyweight fighter. But back to this book, I wanted to do something that, being a boxing fan and a fan of boxing movies, I wanted to do something that had never been done before. And there's never been a book that collected boxing movie posters and lobby cards and foreign posters. There's been plenty of books on film noir. There's been books on westerns, war films, and other genres, but there's never been anything that explored boxing. So I wanted to do this, and thankfully I was able to get a great forward from Steve, and our discussions we've had about movies and stuff were definitely an influence on me and the movies I picked. And then Eddie Muller, being a friend and who I work for, writing the introduction, and my relationship with him and his ties to boxing, his strong and long ties to boxing, also were an influence on me. And he's a big poster fan, as is Steve. These are the people. It was like Steve and Eddie were the people definitely who influenced me and kind of helped me gain the knowledge of posters, of movie posters, and the art of posters, and the design of posters. So I wanted to include as much as I possibly could. I couldn't include everything, but I came pretty damn close to including just about everything. I think there's like 200 posters and lobby cards.
It's a comprehensive volume. One of the things that educated me about the book was how many films Joe Louis did. I had no idea that Joe Louis was in so many boxing films. And I even mentioned to Michael, geez, if I can track these movies down, I'd love to write an article for Ringside Seat about the movies that Joe Louis did.
Yeah, there were, I was surprised that
I might be able to find them on YouTube, or maybe hunt Amazon and see if I can get them on DVD, but I'd love to watch them and analyze them and do an article on them.
Like, here's one that I from the book.
Yeah.
Spirit of Youth. That's a 6-sheet, which is what Steve? What's the size of a 6-sheet? About 40 by 80.
40 by more like 81 by 81, I think.
Well, okay, it's a square, so it's like 81 by 81. So, anyways, this was a movie that he actually starred in, and you can see in the lobby cards below, one of the lobby cards, there is some boxing in it. The movie on the other side is Kid Galahad, which is what's interesting is that this is the more interesting and Kid Galahad poster. It's a foreign poster for the movie, and this is the one that actually shows boxing. Whereas the other Kid Galahad posters, 3-sheet figure, the 3-sheet kind of figure,
the 3-sheet
has some boxing in it, but the 1-sheet just has Betty Davis and Edward G. Robinson.
Sure,
because those back then everything was star driven.
Right.
Absolutely, and this is that period. Yeah, this is that Warner Brothers period that the stars had no control over what they were in. And man, Betty Davis is so beautifully willowy in Kid Galahad. I love that, and I love seeing those early '30s Warner Brothers films in general. But and of course Elvis later remade Kid Galahad in the early '60s with Charles Bronson and Gig Young.
Right.
Yeah, actually, and I included that. Yeah, Charles Bronson is his trainer. You know, I have never seen that movie.
Oh, it's a great movie. It's fun.
I haven't either.
I wanted to make sure that was something I definitely wanted to make sure I included. But going back to what Steve was talking about, here's another poster for Joe Louis from Spirit of Youth, and then Joe Louis, The Fight Never Ends. I have not looked into these movies. I am of the belief that The Fight Never Ends is a lost film, but I could be wrong.
I've never seen it. I know. Agreed. I'm not sure if it has. Of course, Dempsey did that Daredevil Jack series of films that Roger Kahn, who wrote that great Dempsey biography back in the 90s, he and I talked about that when I interviewed him. And yeah, unfortunately, those are lost movies. And Tunny, from my intro.
Yeah, I saw in your intro the Fighting Marine.
Absolutely.
I did not include those. But
were you able to find them? Posters
of the foreign posters for The Heart of the Fall.
Yeah,
so much more interesting than the American poster.
Oh God,
much more visceral, much grittier.
The American poster, there's the one,
the glove.
This one,
the photo one,
the glove is was the main 1-sheet. The other one is like a newspaper. It's almost like a newspaper design. And what Eddie talked about in his introduction was how it was publicized in the foreign countries, the poster, and the emphasis was on Bogart, and it was Bogart's last film,
right?
And he was very sick when he made that movie.
Yes.
So the emphasis is Bogart, and you showed that the German poster before, and how it was. I don't think they wanted to emphasize Bogart's death or him being sick in the American like campaign. The other thing that's something that I'm hoping that people can get if you're into movies and you're into posters, is how these movies were publicized and how they like the setup. This is her man. She shudders under every blow while the frenzied crowd cries, "Kill him!"
Yep.
How about "Don't win," they warned, "or you'll lose your life." The taglines are just so vivid and very descriptive. But again, they go back to that classic Hollywood tradition of condemning boxing. It's all about the corruption. It's all about sad endings. Bad endings.
But man, the setup, what I love.
So, and then going back to Rocky, this one is a poster concept that wasn't used for Rocky that they were considering. That I found really interesting. And this one is talk about a drive-in, seeing Rocky at a drive-in. That's the drive-in poster.
And it's a perfect drive-in poster. It's black and white. It's visceral. It's physical, and it's minimal. The minimalism of it is what grabbed me. And I looked at it and I said, it's a perfect drive-in poster. That is a poster for a drive-in movie, a low-budget drive-in movie, which in some ways Rocky is.
100% it was. Absolutely it was, man.
And here's the Japanese design for the first Rocky film.
Wow. That's great. Jesus.
And you have the one sheet, the classic one sheet that everybody knows of the two hands and walking into the night.
Right.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, so there's an extensive Rocky section where I show all the movies all the way through Rocky 5, I think. Or I think I stopped at Rocky 5.
Okay. Movie posters don't have the composition that they did, even the photograph ones of previous eras. Something changed, and I'm not sure what, but yeah,
They're not selling movies anymore with posters.
They don't need posters anymore.
They don't need posters anymore. They sell it through the internet, through social media, through television. You don't need posters anymore, and that's a shame because the artistry of the poster is gone, and it's been gone for quite a while.
That's another thing that I hope that the book, gets across is, the great artistry of movie posters. I don't think you have to be a boxing fan to like this book. I tried to include, a lot of the film noir versions of boxing movies. So if you're a film noir fan, you'd enjoy it. And as you can see, I had Penitentiary in there, which is a movie I like a lot.
Oh no, I love that movie.
Penitentiary and Penitentiary 2 a lot. That's a favorite of mine.
Sure, Leon Isaac Kennedy, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who looked very much like Sugar Ray.
Right. And then he did, and it's in the book is his remake of Body and Soul, which he did with his wife.
Yes, Jane Kennedy, absolutely, man. Yeah.
Right.
God.
And to segue into what I was going to announce,
please.
Also included in this book is later stuff. It goes right up to 2020. And I included the documentary for Roberto Duran.
There you go.
And also the documentary Pariah about Sonny Liston, which is based on Sean Assel's book. And there you go. Our next book, Ringside Seat's next book, is a revised and updated version of Sean's book, The Murder of Sonny Liston, Las Vegas Heroin and Heavyweights. And I designed that cover, and Sean is currently writing a new chapter, an updated epilogue. The book has never been released as a paperback in the United States. And like I said, the Showtime documentary about Sonny Liston was based on Sean's book. Sean appears in it, as does Nigel Collins. It's an excellent documentary. I don't know if you've seen it.
Of course. Yes.
And this story is an amazing story that Sean wrote about. He did a great job investigating. He was when ESPN magazine existed, Sean was their lead investigative reporter. I think of it as the Nick Tosches biography of Sonny Liston. Sean takes over when that book ends. It's like, then it takes over those Las Vegas years after Liston, he's still fighting, but he's not fighting as much, and the life that he's leading and what happens. And Sean really builds this incredible case with interviews and investigations about how Liston died and what happened to Liston during that time.
I was watching a Monkees documentary, and I love Liston's appearance in their film Head.
Right.
And it's a great scene.
Nicholson directed it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
what about Sonny on that on the airline commercial with Andy Warhol?
Yep. enough leg room and whatever. And
Sonny
Willow's
is
trying to engage him in conversation, and Sonny looks just
he's
painfully.
he's a fascinating guy. Sean's book is great. I can't wait to read his epilogue chapter about what he's found out since. I don't know, John, if you read.
I haven't read Sean's book. I read Tachis' book, but I would love, and I saw the documentary, obviously the Showtime documentary. No, I'm very excited to read it, and would love to have him on to talk about it and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, we would love to. Sean and I would. I talked to Sean on the phone today, so it's like we'd love to come on.
Oh, it'd be great.
When we have the book, it's coming out in 2022.
Wonderful. And I want to talk to Bill about his Matthew Saad Muhammad book as well.
Yeah, that's gonna be a great book. I was so thrilled that Bill asked me to design the cover, and if anybody has read his Ezra Charles book, which is one of the best biographies of a boxer that's ever been written,
100%.
You can just imagine how great the Saad Muhammad book is going to be.
Well, and again, Michael, I mean, really, I want to pour through Ringside Seat 16 here. And just your composition of pages and the way you handle photographs for these various articles. I mean, you really do, man. I'm not just saying this because we're talking. You do an excellent job. It immediately grabs your attention, and I think presents the articles in a great way. And that's why I love talking to you guys, because I really believe in what you're doing with the magazine and these books as well. I mean, it's great stuff.
Yeah. Well, we're proud of it. We work hard.
He just does a fantastic job with Ringside Seat and with Noir City. He finds images that I don't think anybody else can find, and puts them together and creates collages and montages that are just absolutely arresting. You can't keep your eyes off them.
And yeah, man. I mean, as the magazine rack at stores is becoming this endangered species, that mostly these days are covered with bride magazines and cooking magazines.
Right.
And you rarely find anything beyond those and everything. It is great that digitally and now physically as well, you could buy the magazine and the annuals that come out every year at Amazon.com or ringsideseatmag.com. Definitely.
Right. So yeah, I mean, our subscriptions are only available for the digital edition of the magazine. But when you subscribe to the digital edition of the magazine, you get our annual book. And on our next show, I'm going to want to unveil the cover for our next annual, which is pretty special. And pretty excited about that. And so what the annual is, and every subscriber gets a copy for free of that book. Here is a previous edition, and filled with photos. And anyways, what these are the best stories from the previous year that Bill, as editor-in-chief, has decided on and picked from the previous year of Ringside Seat.
Mike,
so you get kind of a print edition, and this model is based off of the Film Noir Foundation's model, which is exactly what they do with their digital magazine. They produce an annual, and so, but we're now also, doing, like you said, we're doing the physical, the print editions, the full color print editions that are available through Amazon.
Mike, is that an existing painting? Or is that something you did for the
Yes, that is an interesting thing. This painting is by Robert Riggs. And before I was a graphic designer, I was a fine artist, and I did boxing prints. And my biggest influence was this artist, Robert Riggs. And he did boxing lithographs. And that's what I did, drawing on a limestone and printing them.
Wow.
I am the proud owner of several of his boxing prints.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I really believe, and I'll say it right now, that I think the cover of Ringside Seat should be graced every once in a while by some of your boxing prints.
Yeah, well, it would be nice maybe one day.
Either a cover for the magazine or a cover for one of the annuals. Because, John, I don't know if you've ever seen Michael's prints, but they are extraordinary.
I don't believe I have, if they haven't been seen in the magazine.
You should see.
I haven't put. I haven't.
Yeah,
put them
man.
in the magazine,
no, I would love to.
They are in the permanent collection of Georgetown University, and the International Monetary Fund, the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, interestingly enough. But the gallery that represented Robert Riggs, the artist that I just showed you, represented me in Washington, D.C. And when I went into the gallery director's office, behind him was this painting.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
Which is an amazing painting. It's Joe Louis beating Max Schmeling, and the towel being thrown in, and it's an amazing painting to see in real life.
It's those, and that wonderful one of Dempsey and Firpo that has been reprinted so many times.
George Bellows. That's George Bellows, and George Bellows. The painting is really famous, but George Bellows did a stone lithograph print of that also.
It's printer in black and white too, and that makes them even more arresting and more eye-catching. Even if they were in color.
No, I understand, and again, it's no disrespect to the current boxing, not only painters but photographers of the modern era, but man, there are just so many interesting Life magazine pictures and Sports Illustrated pictures and the like. The magazines that don't exist anymore back in the day that are just these classic moments. I mean, isn't it what's his face? Carmen Basilio, one of his wins, I think, against
Basilio beating Tony DeMarco.
Tony DeMarco, yep.
I have shown on the Twitter account often, which I consider the greatest boxing photo ever made.
So amazing.
Taken. I wish I could share it. I've shared it countless times on
even
the
better than
website.
Ali standing over Liston.
What's that?
Even better than Ali standing over Liston, that famous photo.
That's a great photo. Neil Leifer is one of the greatest photographers ever. It's an amazing, but for me, that photo, and I think I actually even said this when I posted it on Twitter, I said, this photo is it's a movie. It's a story there's a story within this photograph. Not to say that that's not true with the Liston Ali photo.
Oh yeah.
It's an iconic photo, but this photo is just the light and just what's going on in the foreground with Tony DeMarco being knocked out, and Carmen Basilio he just won the title, welterweight title, right? That was for the welterweight title.
That's right.
And so it's an amazing photo. Steve, I'll email you the photo so you can see.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, great.
Oh God, and it's a black and white photo, Steve. I mean, that's the thing. I agree with you in terms of the iconography of the Ali Liston picture. But yeah, I mean, this really is even more dramatic,
right?
And that Ali one is incredibly dramatic. And of course, what we love. I worked at Sporting News Radio, and my program director had it in his office, and I was able to show him that great moment where, if you look between Ali's legs, you see Larry Merchant with that shocked look on his face of the knockdown. And I'm like, yeah, you see that guy right there? I'm like, look at that face. He's like, oh my God, that's Larry Merchant. I'm like, yep, from 1965, man. I'm like, pretty cool. Or whatever year it was.
John, I want to ask you something, and I asked Michael the same thing. I don't know if you've watched the miniseries Godfather of Harlem on Epix.
Yes.
So you've watched it in its entirety.
Not in its entirety, but I'm a little behind. But go ahead, ask the question.
I asked Michael this question. There's a scene, and you may have seen it, where an actor playing Cassius Clay is called to a meeting with Vincent Gigante and the mob. Vincent Gigante, the Chin. And they sit him down and they say to him, listen, we want you to throw you the next fight because you're fighting our fighter. If you throw this fight, we will hook you up with Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship of the world. And I asked Michael, did that really happen? So I don't know if it did.
I don't remember reading about that. I don't remember reading anything about that.
I can't even think of who the contender might have been, too.
I don't know. Did you watch that scene? Were you invested?
No, I haven't gotten to that scene yet, and I can't wait to see it. So that's great. No, it's okay, Steve. I mean,
it's a terrific show.
Yeah.
But
no, it is. I really do love the show. I think it's excellent, and I'm massive Forrest Whitaker fan and everything. And it's it's a very good gangster series. That's the great thing. I mean, I really was going to chuck Epix, and there are so many great original television series that they're doing in so many different genres. And in fact, as we talked about before we were recording, the music documentary that they just made about A&M Records and the Laurel Canyon one they did a year or two ago.
Mhm.
No, it really is a great cable company, and I'm like, I'm not ready to throw it away. Plus, I mean, as Michael and I are comic book fans, their Pennyworth series about the day,
I haven't seen that.
I
Yeah.
haven't
the
seen
adventures
that.
of young Alfred before he's
Seen that either.
being a butler for the Wayne family and stuff, and you see him being a secret agent in the '60s. It's fantastic. So yeah, good stuff. Hilarious. No, so yeah, I'm a big Godfather of Harlem fan. I can't wait to watch it because I can't think of, I'm like maybe Doug Jones, maybe I'm trying to think of who,
I don't know. I don't think that's true. And if it is true, I don't think Ali was present. It may have been something that was discussed with the Louisville group that represented Ali at that time. Because you said Steve specifically Cassius Clay, so he hadn't had the title yet, so he hadn't changed his name. He wasn't officially a part of the Nation of Islam yet, so he was represented by the Louisville group.
Yeah, the Louisville Sporting Club or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, and I can't believe that. I think they would have shielded him from that. So I think that it sounds like fiction to me, but Jonathan Eags, that's how you pronounce his name? His biography of Ali. I've got that for my Kindle, and I plan on reading it. I haven't read it yet. It's like 700 pages. So
yeah. I remember when that came out a year or two ago. I think,
and actually, he was actually a consulting. He was a consultant to the Ken Burns documentary, and he's actually interviewed. He's interviewed in the documentary,
which was fantastic too.
Yeah, that was great. This is the best thing I've seen about Ali. There's been
I agree.
So much shit about Ali, so many lies, and so much crap about him recently, in particular. But it was outstanding. I was really hoping it would be good and it would be honest and truthful, and it was.
I agree. No, absolutely. I really also appreciated. Now I'm blanking on his name. The briefly WBO heavyweight champion that did a lot of talking head work on that. The fight.
Oh yeah, Michael. I can't. You know who I'm thinking. Yeah, he was excellent. He really broke down some of Ali's fights and how he fought. I thought really well.
I agree, and again, weird connections, comic book connections, and stuff. He apparently was in a play in New York that actually he directed a play about Bobby Cassidy in New York, an off-Broadway play. And one of the women that was in the
Bobby Cassidy, his son writes for Ringside Seat.
There you go. Well, this woman that I met that was working for one of the charity organizations that shows up at comic conventions, the Hero Initiative. It's a very wonderful woman. She's like, oh, we were just talking at dinner, and I mentioned that I used to cover boxing and stuff for Ring and Boxing Illustrated and on radio and TV. And she said, do you know who Bobby Cassidy was? I'm like, oh, of course. And she mentioned that Michael made this play. She was in it, played Cassidy's wife. And she's like, I can get you in touch with Michael Bent if you'd like him for your podcast. And I'm like, God, that'd be great. So I've been contacting Michael and trying to get a time where we both can do it. But yeah, man, no, I can't wait to talk because he was amazing on that.
Yeah, he was very good. So going back to Bobby Cassidy, his son is written like 3 or 4 times for Ringside Seat, and his dad is a big Ringside Seat fan. So he asked me to create for his dad, when it was his dad's birthday, a Ringside Seat cover featuring his dad.
Oh, that's great.
Like a mock-up cover.
Sure.
So that was like his dad's, that was his birthday present for his dad. He like framed it, and it's like I had his dad like featured like the big, main light heavyweight champ or contender, on the cover. So
that's terrific.
Yeah, I like the Cassidys a lot.
That's awesome, man. Well, again, everyone can purchase the latest issue, number 16 of Ringside Seat, featuring this great cover story by Steve Cronenberg, the 45th anniversary of Rocky. Amazing features inside, as always, as well. And Michael put together this incredible book, Ringside Cinema, that is, again, just a gorgeous look at the artistry behind so many iconic film posters that in this case obviously are boxing, but you can just appreciate the artistry again of some of these great images. So well done, guys. As always, appreciate the conversation, appreciate the work you guys do every time a new issue of Ringside Scene and the new books come out. And again, also coming up in 2022, The Murder of Sonny Liston, right there for you. And can't wait to see that from Sean Assail. How do you say his name?
Assail.
Assail. All right, very good. And yeah, man, no, this was great. As always, boys, I appreciate your time and the conversation.
Thanks for having us on, John.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Absolutely. Until next time, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. Coming up in just a couple hours, I'm going to be talking Kinescope with my buddies Gabe Hardman and Ian Brill and Jeff Parker. And we're taking a look at the excellent Edward R. Murrow show, Person to Person, and some of those great celebrity interviews that Murrow did over the years. So until then, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.